Good afternoon. Welcome to the Zoomtown Experiment, episode number 53. This is going to be a status update as to what's been going on. I think the last one I did was approximately a month ago, and wow, have things changed. For the most part, not for the better. But in this past month or 6 weeks, whatever it's been, a lot of testing and experimenting continued to develop the system so that it could be functional for our ultimate goal, the actual experimentation with our new transportation system. Well, along the way, with so much extensive testing, more and more problems popped up. And that's causing a situation where I have to really reevaluate the path that I'm currently on. So that's the purpose of this status update. Let's take a look at a little bit of an outline that I put together in slide presentations that'll help guide me through and guide you through what is currently changing. Outstanding issues have come and gone. There was one major bug that we talked about in the last episode where the Pico was freezing up, and that's been resolved, so yay, good, that's gone. One less thing on my plate. But with all the other testing that really became very extensive recently, positioning is a major issue. And that has to do with all forms of positioning. I will say the Zoomie performs beautifully whenever it's line following, but its knowledge, so to speak, of where it is at any given time is always in question. There's a number of reasons leading into that, but one of the other things that come into play with this is there are multiple coordinate systems utilized. I have incremental, absolute relative to road, and absolute relative to Zoomtown. And that is getting to be a very big nightmare with me being able to track its position locally within the Zoomie and then for the scheduler in how it gets information. To help look at that problem and look for a solution, a number of months back, one of our fellow viewers suggested we take a look at the Tiny Code Reader. It's a QR code reader. And relative to this experiment, it's expensive, but it very well may solve one of the major problems that I'm currently experiencing with the system right now. It currently looks like that will be a key element to the success of us getting to the point where we can actually start running experiments for the transportation system. Another issue that's come up is managing the code is a major issue. It has become very difficult to solve problems in the way it is written and so forth. But we'll dive into that a little more in a few minutes. With regard to positioning, there's been a handful of areas in the layout where I can get it working great for a while, then things just go sour on me. And these red squares denote the primary areas. Now, that very well could be simply because those are the areas where I did a lot of testing. But I've never been able to really resolve any one of the problems no matter what I do. So that tells me it's a system problem, not just a localized problem with maybe some bad data relative to those coordinates. One of the things that is feeding these positional errors is for the Zoomie to know where it is. As you may remember, I had a set of experiments or a set of magnets, and I still do have them in the layout, and they will still continue to be part of the overall positioning solution. But when I was doing a lot of experimenting in this area where I back out of a driveway and then start going in this direction, be it this driveway, this one, this one, this one, or these 4 driveways going up or down, or coming off this little short crossing road. For the Zoomie to know that, okay, once I back out and get to a certain point, I was relying on magnets. In the right lane, the magnet would have been for a pre-established preset position, and a magnet on the left side of center line would be the 0 set position. That works pretty reliably as long as the Zoomie, when it backs up, it's in the right spot to read the magnet at that location. That has not always been the case. So that is under serious consideration at this point to find a solution to that. Working with multiple coordinate systems, that unfortunately came through development, and looking at it from 2 different perspectives when I conceived how I wanted to handle positional data. 2 different perspectives, meaning when I'm looking at it from the scheduler point of view, I have one origin, and every position is relative to that origin. Here we can see that in the Zoomtown layout, the upper left-hand corner is the X and Y origin, X plus going to the right. Now, normally in Cartesian coordinates, Y plus would go up, but the computer graphics always seem to go from top down as plus. So for me, being a CNC guy, this is really a mind bender, but I'm sticking with this inverted way for Y-axis direction. But that is our origin and our reference and our positional datum for moving around in Zoomtown from the scheduler point of view. That information actually comes from the Zoomie itself reporting its location where it thinks it is. And in that case, within the Zoomie, I position it using 2 different methods. I have some roads where at the start of it, I establish that as an absolute 0 point relative to the road. So the start of the road is always 0, and I position relative to that to wherever I want to go. That works out really well for certain roads. For other movements, I can't do that. For example, as we travel down this road, the Zoomie will stop about in this area. From this area to get to here so that it can pivot, turn, and go left and continue around this way, this isn't technically a road. It's an intersection. So I have to move a specific distance. What that means is taking all these different coordinate systems and getting the information from it for reporting accurately from the Zoomie over to the scheduler has gotten way out of control, and it is not going very well at all in order to move forward. As mentioned at the top of this, I said a fella, Steve Woodgate, he suggested this sensor, and the initial experience with it was very promising but very problematic at the same time. It solved one problem but created several others. And as time goes on, your mind gets the roadblocks out of the way and you start looking at things from a different perspective, because now my really big problem is positional tracking and localization, etc. So that becomes a primary problem for me to solve. So QR code and Tiny Code Reader are a solution to that. I just have to engineer my way out of the new problems that it introduces. But real quickly, I don't want to go into detail on that because that'll be an upcoming video, and that'll be one of my longer videos. But you can see here, this is our right side of the road. We're going along here with our Zoomie. This would be our zero set marker for this road. Technically it's at 1 inch. Zero would be back here, but I needed a place to put the magnet and have a stripe to indicate on. The right magnets are all the existing preset positions. Every one of those from the Zoomie, I communicate back to the scheduler. If you see a magnet within a couple of inches, you are here. And that works some of the time, frankly most of the time, but not all of the time. So with that not working reliably, that's where the QR code comes in. I can drop these QR codes anywhere I want, and that QR code specifies technically four pieces of information right now from what I'm testing. It will tell me where I am on the absolute position relative to the road. So this spot right here would be our absolute position. So the first value I get from the QR code is saying, whoops, you are X number of inches this way. Then the next two codes are sequential, are describing the X and Y absolute coordinate relative to the Zoomtown layout. A straight up absolute coordinate, so that works very well. Unfortunately, the Zoomie had to communicate it before, but in this case, it's just feeding back that specific information. And the way I've got it working right now in testing is such that it's actually positionally accurate within a 0.5 millimeter of when it's at that spot. It sees the QR code and other data. It knows exactly where it is within a 0.5 millimeter, which is awesome for this project. So this is somewhat how it's going to work, hopefully. We'll get through a lot of the other details further down the road. But one more thing I just wanted to point out. We'll go here to the workbench. This was, I think, my test rig early on with the sensor. I knew a sensor had to be mounted up high. Didn't know where or how I would mount it or anything like that. But the camera would be looking down toward the road surface and read the QR codes down there. And of course, this was crude, it was simple, and it was fast. Since then, I have been doing a lot of modifications to Zoomie number 1, giving them a beeper, a voltmeter, and several other interesting devices. But here you can see there's the tiny code reader on a bracket. It has an LED, a very high-powered LED, to provide consistent lighting, and then a bracket to hold it in place. Now this is still only a prototype bracket. Most likely it will not be the final case, because right now I got to figure out how I can get some form of a body over that big arm. And that'll be one of the engineering solutions I'll have to come up with. I'd prefer it not have the Zoomies running around on the layout looking like this, so I really do want to have a body to encapsulate most of the componentry. But that's where I gotta focus a little bit of time in the coming month or two. Relative to the actual Zoomie control program, the software within the Zoomie, there are some issues that I need to address. And these are very serious issues and are going to require a lot of attention. Plain and simply, the program is getting too complex to follow, especially with the way I'm working with this project, where I might be away from it for a month, in the middle of developing some maneuver, some section of code, something like that. I drop in from nowhere. I got to figure everything out and then start developing further. Or if I'm resolving a problem, I got to deal with that solution right away. And with that difficulty of trying to solve problems, it just slows down the process dramatically. I could spend 3-4 hours refamiliarizing myself with that area of code to find a very simple, misnamed variable or something like that. So it is getting too difficult to follow efficiently, and I still have a lot of development and refining to do. It's also getting very difficult to manage this program. It's gotten big. Some of the functions are very large, got a lot of global variables in there, etc. I've been around programming long enough where global variables were the normal variables and everything else after that for a while was a special kind of variable. So I'm comfortable in that world, but right now it's getting uncomfortable and it's becoming an embarrassing mess. Taking too much time to find code sections. Scrolling through all that code is getting more and more difficult. A lot of the code blocks are starting to all look the same to me. I've been in it so much, but I can't find the areas that are causing the specific problem, somewhat because of the code goes across several functions. So I need to bounce around a little bit, follow the chain of events from one place to the next to finally get to the answer that I'm looking for. Not a good thing when I have to be efficient. And as mentioned, global variables have caused a problem, not insurmountable, and I don't think even the solution that I'm considering or most likely going to follow, it will still have some of the same kind of problems, but it'll have a little better protection from the ill effects. The other thing that's been horrible on my part, and I've tried very hard not to do this, I do a lot of experimenting. If I have an idea for a code or a routine, an algorithm, whatever it is, I like to try a couple different ways of doing things, especially if I'm not comfortable or confident with it. Sometimes I try to get more elegant with the code, whatever the case may be, but I have several different experimental code sections in there. And often I'll break them out as a separate version, try it, use an X denotation, so on the file name, X, and then I can play in there knowing that unless this works perfectly, I just leave it alone and abandon it, and then I go back into my linear development process. But along the way, I think I just got a little too messy and careless and left a lot of bits and pieces here and there, a lot of unused variables, things of that nature. All of that's contributing to the problems that are making it difficult to fix all these positional errors. Looking forward, to deal with all this, I identify the problems, then I have to develop some form of a resolution to deal with these problems. And first and foremost, and we already talked about that, is a different approach to position handling. Getting rid of multiple or as many, trying to narrow down the number of coordinate systems we have to work with, and then bringing in other technology to refine it so it works more reliably and less dependent on certain assumptions. And that would be the implementation of the tiny code reader for reading the QR codes. I think there's a lot of promise there, and in experiments, things looked even better, and I'll explain all that in an upcoming episode. The next thing, and this is the one I really hold off till the absolute very end of committing to, and that's a complete rewrite of the Zoomie control program. Now, that in itself is a huge undertaking, but I have a lot of code fragments that work very good, very solidly. I don't go back and revisit them at all. So I can still do a lot of reusability, even though I didn't write this in a modular way that would lend itself really well for this condition. But I think I'm at that crossroads right now where I must rewrite the program utilizing a different thought process and a different methodology to solve all the other problems. And you probably are guessing where I'm going with that, and that'll be the subject of 2 videos out in the future. So we'll be getting into that shortly. The scheduler software status is has been, I can still work with it. It's kind of a mess, but working with that gaming Pygame environment, it creates problems, and it makes it more difficult for me to understand, primarily because of how it operates. And I can't get my brain wrapped around it in a comfortable way. But I'm able to make it do what I want in almost every single instance. And I'm not getting into some really weird problems yet. So as far as the code goes, I'm marching forward with that. So a lot of my development now over there will be dealing with getting automation to work with regard to the whole experiment. In other words, a start function that starts the whole process, getting all 16 Zoomies positions to move to and sending them on their way and doing what it has to do to deal with that. A way to stop the whole thing, and that would be tied into the emergency stop button that's on the operator panel. And then we need to be able to restart from one of those stops. And then finally, a way to end the experiment as it's running. They won't run forever. Power testing so far shows that I've really got probably in the neighborhood of 4 hours of safe runtime on the batteries. Even with all the equipment now that's on the Zoomie, it's still looking pretty good at about 4 hours. So nonetheless, but I still have to have a way to stop the experiment before the batteries all get below safe voltages. Beyond that, there will be the implementation and testing of the auto routing, or the shortest path algorithm. I need to modify the trip plan output based on any of the new positional methodologies that I am implementing, and then adapt to any new changes that I may come up with in the Zoomie control program. If that gets rewritten, most likely some of the information communicating between the two might also need to be altered. So with that, I think that'll give you a pretty full picture of how the Zoomtown experiment exists right now, what's happening, why I'm having difficulty with getting videos out every week. Unfortunately, I have this much time each week to work on this, and if my coding time takes this much time, I don't get to make a video. So that's how these things fall behind. And with all the debugging of that last problem I was experiencing, I'm way behind. So it's going to be catch-up mode probably for a couple of months. So please bear with me. But that's what this slide is informing you of. I'm going to try to stay on the 2-week schedule. Some topics will be short. I might be able to pump out a video every week for a little bit, but then go back to the 2-week schedule and so forth. Plus, I've been needing a break, so I've been putting out some of the more general interest videos here and there, just so I can get out of the code of the Zoomtown experiment for a day, clear my mind, put out another video, and then get back into it with a little fresher feel, so to speak. So maybe if you haven't done so with subscribing and everything else, there's that notification bell. If you click on that thing, I guess it sends out notifications when I output a video, so that way you can kind of, oh, Chris put up a video, let's go check it out today, etc. So that's overall, in a nutshell, where I'm at, where I'm going, and a rough guide of how I'm going to get there. In the next video, I'm going to take a deep dive into this QR code and the tiny code reader again. And I think there's some really cool, interesting things that I've found in all my testing. And some of them are just pretty weird, but it seemed to help dramatically. So I hope you stick around for that. After that, we're going to go through If I go with the rewrite of the code of the Zoomie control program, as I see it right now, I'm going to I won't go into a line-by-line discussion of it because it's, like 1,000 lines of code. But I will give you a top-level overview of the code and the structure so you understand how things are progressing and what I've done to try to rein in a lot of these problems that I was just talking about with regard to being able to find code, manage it, understand it, be able to pick back up in it, and all the simplification that goes along with this new approach, or hopefully. So that'll wrap it up for this episode. I really look forward to seeing you in the next one when we talk about that cool tiny code sensor thing again. Till then, you have a great time out there. Happy programming, and thanks for watching.